The vastness of space had always been a place of silence, where stars burned far away and the planets spun in their lonely orbits. For many years, Earth had been a small, quiet planet in a remote corner of the galaxy. But all that was about to change in the depths of space. The alien empire, known as the Xiphorians, had been watching Earth. They had seen the small, developing planet with its primitive technology. To them, humanity was no more than an insect, insignificant and easily crushed. They had invaded countless worlds before, claiming them for their empire. Their warships were the size of small cities, bristling with advanced weapons and technology. The Xiphorians had never lost a battle, and they expected Earth to be no different. But Earth was not prepared for what was coming. The people of Earth had spent years building their first fleet, a single line of defense against the unknown. It wasn't much, just a handful of ships designed to protect the planet from any potential threats. They were not as advanced as the alien fleets, but they were determined. They had the will to fight, and that alone could make a difference. The day the Xiphorians arrived was like any other. Earth's defense forces were monitoring space as usual when the alarms went off. Something had appeared near the edge of the solar system, too large to be a natural object. The radar systems picked it up immediately. It was huge, far too large to be anything human-made. The people on Earth had only seen such ships in the movies, and even then they were just fantasy. But this was real. The massive Xiphorian fleet, led by their flagship, a black, imposing structure with countless weapons mounted on every side, moved into position. Their ships were armed with weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. The Xiphorians didn't bother to hide their intentions. They came in full force, their ships blocking out the stars in their wake. Earth's response was immediate. The fleet that had been built to defend the planet was ready, but it was nothing compared to the might of the Xiphorian armada. The humans had only a few ships, their weapons much smaller and less powerful, but they were determined. The Xiphorians had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. The first human fleet, led by Captain John Harris, took off into space, racing toward the incoming alien ships. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that had never known defeat. But Captain Harris and his crew didn't flinch. They knew what was at stake. They knew they had no choice but to fight. As they approached the Xiphorian fleet, the tension grew. The alien ships loomed larger and larger as the human fleet closed in. The radio was filled with the hum of static, but the message was clear. The Xiphorians were here to conquer. They were not here to negotiate. The humans would either surrender or they would be wiped out. Captain Harris made the decision. There would be no surrender. The human fleet would fight with everything they had. The first battle began with a barrage of laser fire from the human ships, their weapons striking the alien ships with precision. The Xiphorians were caught off guard. Their ships were powerful, but they were not prepared for the humans' tenacity. The human ships, small and agile, darted in and out, striking the alien ships with deadly accuracy. The Xiphorians quickly realized that the humans were not the weak, untrained beings they had assumed. The battle raged on, both sides suffering. Losses. The human fleet was no match for the Xiphorian armada, but their tactics were catching the aliens off guard. They used the Xiphorians' own size against them, moving in close and avoiding the massive energy blasts from the alien ships. It was clear the humans were fighting smarter, not harder. The battle turned into a chaotic, violent dance. Explosions lit up the dark expanse of space as ships from both sides were destroyed. But the Zyphorians were losing their grip. Their ships were larger, but the human ships were faster, more flexible. For the first time, the Zyphorians began to realize that this was not going to be an easy victory. The humans had no intention of losing. They fought with everything they had. Every shot, every maneuver was calculated for maximum impact. They had the advantage of surprise, and they used it well. For every alien ship that fell, another human ship soared through space, untouched. By the chaos, the Zyphorians, in their arrogance, had underestimated Earth. They had thought that humanity would cower in fear, that their single fleet would fall within hours. But instead, the humans fought back with a fierceness they had never seen before. The alien commanders began to realize that this battle would not be over quickly. The humans were more resourceful than they had imagined, despite their superior technology. The Zyphorians found themselves retreating. The human fleet, though smaller, had pushed them back. The aliens had never experienced anything like this before. They had never met an enemy who fought like this, with such determination and courage. The battle ended with a decisive victory for humanity. The Zyphorians, though still formidable, had been pushed back. The human fleet, battered and broken, had managed to hold their ground. Earth had won the first battle, but this was just the beginning. As the alien ships retreated, the humans stared at the void of space. They had made their stand. They had proven they were not to be underestimated. But deep down, they knew that this was only the start. The Zyphorians would not give up easily. They would come back stronger, and Earth would have to be ready. The first fleet had shaken the aliens to their core. But the question remained, would it be enough? Asterisk news of the victory spread across Earth faster than any communication system could handle. The whole world watched as the first human fleet, battered but unbroken, returned home. The moment the alien armada retreated, there was a collective breath of relief. The impossible had been done. Humanity had stood its ground against a force far more powerful and far more advanced. But even as Earth celebrated its unexpected victory, the true consequences of the battle were unfolding in deep space. The Empire, reeling from their loss, was scrambling to re-establish control over their forces. The shockwave from the defeat reached every corner of the galaxy. The Zyphorian fleet commanders were humiliated, their invincibility shattered, and they were furious. On the Zyphorian homeworld, the highest council of war generals convened in urgent secrecy. The images of their shattered fleet, burned and broken, flashed across their screens. They had never experienced defeat, especially not at the hands of a primitive species like humanity. The very idea of humans, mere ants in their view holding their ground, had rattled them to their core. "The humans have caught us by surprise," one of the generals hissed, his voice thick with anger. "But it will not happen again." Another general, older and wiser, spoke carefully. The human fleet was small, their ships weak. "But they fought with tactics that we did not foresee. We will crush them, but we must move swiftly." Despite their reassurances, the mood was grim. The Zyphorians were not accustomed to losing, and the mere thought of Earth daring to stand up to them was infuriating. But there was more at stake than just a fleet. The Zyphorians needed to reassert their dominance. If they didn't, their empire could start to unravel. Back on Earth, however, the humans were far from relaxed. The victory had been unexpected, yes, but they knew it was only a matter of time before the Zyphorians returned, angrier and more determined. And when they did, Earth would need more than just one fleet. They needed to prepare for the storm that was coming. Captain Harris, the leader of the First Fleet, had barely set foot back on Earth before the orders came in. Earth's War Council had made their decision they would expand their fleet, and they would do it fast. "We've won the first battle," Captain Harris said, staring at the holographic projection of the galaxy. "But we cannot rest. We've shown them we can fight, but now we must show them that we can win." The War Council agreed. The Xiphorians would not just target the fleet, they would target Earth itself. Every possible resource had to be directed into building more ships, recruiting more soldiers, and refining their strategies. The planet was united like never before, and people from every nation were ready to fight. But the Xiphorians were not idle on their warships. The alien commanders worked tirelessly to create a new strategy. The First Fleet had caught them off guard, but they wouldn't make the same mistake again. They would come back stronger, faster, and more ruthless. With their enormous empire spanning across countless star systems, the Xiphorians had access to the most advanced technology. They quickly modified their weapons, adapting them to counter the humans' tactical style. Their ships were already massive, but they added even more firepower-reinforced shields, faster engines, and more devastating weapons. Every ship in the Xiphorian fleet became a fortress, designed to bring humanity to its knees. Meanwhile, Earth's preparation was underway. New fleets were being constructed, each one an upgrade from the last. The humans now had the advantage of experience. They knew what the Xiphorians were capable of, and they knew what they had to do to survive. The humans had learned quickly that size didn't always win battles. Strategy and determination would be the deciding factor. As the days passed, tensions between the two sides grew. The Xiphorians could not let this loss go unanswered, and Earth had only one option: prepare for war. But there was a growing sense of uncertainty. Humanity had won the first battle, yes, but no one could deny the overwhelming power of the alien empire. Would Earth's new fleets be enough? Could they really go toe-to-toe with a force like that? The suspense hung heavy in the air. Every nation on Earth, every person in the world, was waiting for the next move. Humanity had taken its stand, but now they had to prove that it wasn't just a fluke. The Xiphorians were coming back, and this time they wouldn't be caught off guard as Earth's fleets readied themselves. Captain Harris watched the stars from his ship's command deck. He knew what was coming. The first battle had shown that humanity could hold its ground, but it had also revealed just how much more they had to learn. The next phase of the war was just beginning, and it would be harder than anything they had faced before. The First Fleet had shaken the Xiphorians to their core, but the true test of humanity's strength was about to begin. In the dark expanse of space, the Xiphorians gathered, their vast empire trembling in the wake of Earth's unexpected victory. Across their warships, their leaders and warriors, full of pride and confidence, now found themselves gripped by a cold realization. The humans were not the primitive, defenseless species they had assumed. The first battle had cracked their arrogance. The true horror, though, was that Earth had proven that it was more than capable of striking backhand, that the Xiphorians were not invincible. The Xiphorian War Council met in secret once more. There, holographic projections flickering in the dim, cold light of their command room. Their leaders, once confident in their overwhelming power, now found themselves questioning everything. The silence in the room was thick, each general unwilling to break the unspoken tension. We were humiliated. One of the warlords, a massive armored Xiphorian named Grathor, growled. A handful of human ships with inferior technology defeated us. I want to know how this happened, and why." His words were harsh, but they struck a chord with every commander in the room. It was clear the Xiphorians had never been so close. To losing, they had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. But they were not ready to admit defeat, not yet. "We need to strike back," said General Varak, a calculating and shrewd strategist. "This was a mistake, a small failure in our vast empire. But it is a failure that must be erased. The humans have shown they can fight, but they cannot fight the full might of the Xiphorian armada." The other generals murmured in agreement, their faces twisted with a mixture of frustration and anger. They had been swift in their decision-making before, but now something felt different. Earth's victory had rattled their confidence in a way that no other battle had. "We will crush them," said another officer, his eyes flashing with rage. "We cannot allow this to continue. The humans must be broken, they will shattered." But General Varak was not so easily convinced. "Our forces are powerful, but we've seen what the humans are capable of. Their tactics were ... unorthodox. The battle didn't go as expected. If we attack with our full might, they might find another way to turn our strength against us." The other generals bristled at the suggestion. To them, the thought of losing to such a small, insignificant race was unthinkable. How could such a fragile species hold their own against the Xiphorians' vast empire? "We'll send everything we have," Gratha insisted, slamming his fist onto the table. "And this time, we won't underestimate them. We'll prepare for their tricks. We'll bring the battle to Earth. They will know fear." The Xiphorians began their preparations, but this time they did not move hastily. Every fleet was reinforced, every weapon upgraded. Their fleets grew larger, more advanced, and more heavily armed, but beneath their overwhelming might, there was an undeniable sense of desperation. The fear was palpable, now fear that a species they had written off could stand up to them. Fear that the humans might just be the spark that could ignite something far greater than they had anticipated. Back on Earth, the quiet tension of waiting was wearing on humanity's nerves. The humans had won the first battle, but they knew the war had only just begun. With every passing day, the knowledge of the Xiphorian retaliation loomed larger. There was no room for complacency. Earth's new fleet, still in the process of construction, was not ready to face an overwhelming armada just yet. But that didn't stop humanity from preparing in other ways. The humans had their own secret weapon now, one that even the Xiphorians could not anticipate. Captain Harris and his fleet commanders had made a bold decision. They would not wait for the Xiphorians to come to Earth. No, this time they would take the fight to them. With the new fleet, humans began to deploy their ships into the vast reaches of space, far beyond Earth's atmosphere. The plan was simple: attack the Xiphorian Empire at its heart. If they could catch the Xiphorians off guard, if they could land a blow where it would hurt the most, the humans might have a chance at survival. The Earth fleet, small compared to the Xiphorians, now had something greater on its side: the element of surprise. The Xiphorians expected the humans to cower and wait, to prepare for the inevitable counterattack. But Earth wasn't about to play by their rules. Humanity would strike where they least expected, as the first waves of human ships left the safety of their homeworld. The Xiphorians were still blind to what was coming. The alien empire's arrogance blinded them to the growing threat, and they believed their new fleets would make short work of Earth's defenses. But Earth had learned from the first battle. The humans now knew how to outsmart the Xiphorians. Their fleet was smaller, but it was equipped with advanced stealth technology. designed to make their ships nearly invisible to the enemy. If the humans could strike the first blow, it would give them a fighting chance. But even as they launched their mission into the depths of space, one truth remained. The Zyphorians were not a force to be taken lightly. No matter how much humanity had prepared, the real test had yet to come. Asterisk space had always been a cold, vast emptiness, but for the humans of Earth, it was no longer silent. With their new fleet of ships and cutting-edge technology, they now ventured far beyond their homeworld, aiming to take the fight to the heart of the Zyphorian Empire. The stakes were higher than ever. Earth had sent a message that the Zyphorians had not expected. Humanity wasn't afraid to fight, and they had come prepared. Captain Harris stood on the bridge of the flagship, the Resolute. He watched as the stars stretched into long lines outside. The windows, a reminder of how far they had come. The journey had been long, and the risks were immense, but the captain had made his decision. There was no turning back now. The mission was clear. Strike deep within Zyphorian territory, disrupt their command centers, and deliver a blow that would shake their empire to its foundations. Captain, we are approaching the edge of their territory, Lieutenant Myers' voice broke through his thoughts, her eyes scanning the readouts. We're entering unknown space. Harris nodded but did not speak. The thought of being so far from home, with a fleet so small compared to the Zyphorian armada, was a daunting one. But they had trained for this moment. The fleet was built for precision, for quick strikes, not for drawn-out battles. Their success depended on speed and surprise. The fleet had 5 ships in total. Each one was a marvel of human engineering, designed for stealth and rapid combat. The Vanguard, Shadow Strike, Titan's Wrath, Eclipse, and the Resolute. These ships were humanity's answer to the Zyphorian juggernauts. They were nimble, fast, and equipped with weapons that had been adapted to counter the Zyphorians' overwhelming firepower. The element of surprise was their only advantage, and they had to make it count. The first target was a Zyphorian communications hub, one that controlled the flow of orders throughout the Empire. Without it, the Zyphorians would be blind, and their fleets would be rendered disorganized, vulnerable. The humans knew that taking down this hub could turn the tide of the war. If they succeeded, it would be a victory not just for the fleet, but for the future of Earth itself. Deploy the strike teams, Harris ordered, his voice firm. We hit them fast, we hit them hard, and we get out before they can react. No time for mistakes. As the fleet moved closer to the Zyphorian stronghold, the tension among the crew was palpable. Every human aboard knew that the fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. Their small fleet was the tip of the spear, cutting through space to deliver a message that would echo across the stars. But as they approached the communications hub, something strange happened. The Zyphorians weren't there. We've reached the coordinates, Captain. No signs of enemy ships, Maya reported, her voice filled with confusion. Harris's brow furrowed. It's a trap. Keep your guard up. He wasn't wrong. As if on cue, an enormous explosion rocked their fleet. It came from nowhere, a burst of energy so intense it shattered the silence of space. The Vanguard took the brunt of the blast, its shields flickering before collapsing entirely. The humans had walked into a carefully set trap. The Zyphorians had known they would come. They had anticipated the strike. But what the Zyphorians hadn't counted on was humanity's resilience. The humans didn't panic. They didn't flee. Instead, they adapted. Captain Harris barked orders, and the fleet quickly adjusted its strategy. The stealth technology that had once been an advantage now proved to be their salvation. They deployed countermeasures, making their ships harder to target. The Zyphorians' weapons, once devastating, began to miss. The human ships darted and weaved through the debris, avoiding the blasts and returning fire with deadly accuracy. The battle had begun. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Harris shouted over the comms. The Titan's wrath let loose a volley of missiles, hitting a Zyphorian cruiser directly. It exploded in a bright flash, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The humans fought with fury and purpose, their ships dancing between the wreckage of the Zyphorian ambush. They were outnumbered, but their tactics were far more unpredictable. The Zyphorians were used to brute force, strong, overwhelming assaults that crushed their enemies. But humanity fought differently. They used precision. They fought with their wits, outsmarting their larger and more powerful adversaries. As the battle raged on, the Zyphorian fleet began to falter. Their commanders, once so confident in their superiority, struggled to keep up with the rapid-fire tactics of the human fleet. Every move the Zyphorians made, the humans countered with something new. It was as if the humans had prepared for this moment for centuries. In the midst of the chaos, Captain Harris's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "We take down their communications hub now. All ships, concentrate fire on the center of the station." The Resolute and its fleet moved as one, lasers and missiles tearing through the blackness of space. In a final, desperate attempt, the Zyphorians tried to regroup, but it was too late. The humans had already seized the advantage. The communications hub exploded in a ball of fire, a symbol of humanity's defiance. The Zyphorians, stunned by the loss, scrambled to recover, but the humans didn't wait for them to regroup. They hit them again, attacking their supply lines and crippling their ability to retaliate. As the last Zyphorian ship fell, silence returned to space. The humans, battered but victorious, had delivered a devastating blow to the alien empire, but there was no time for celebration. The Zyphorians would regroup, and when they did, they would come for Earth with everything they had. The fight was far from over. Captain Harris stood silently as he watched the aftermath. "We've made our stand. Now we prepare for their next move." Humanity's bold stand had sent a message across the stars. Earth would never bow. The war had just begun, and the Zyphorians would soon realize that humanity was more than just a threat. They were a force to be reckoned with. Asterisk, the Zyphorians had never encountered anything like this. The humans, once thought to be a simple, primitive species, had turned the tables in ways the alien empire couldn't have predicted. The battle over their communications hub had been a devastating loss, but the real damage had been done long before that. The Zyphorian empire was beginning to crumble from the inside. News of their losses spread across their warships, their battle stations, their very command centers. The once untouchable invaders now found themselves caught in the jaws of a war they had no strategy for. They were in uncharted territory, and it was beginning to show, while the Zyphorian commanders scrambled to recover from their setbacks. Earth's War Council had already taken the next step. The humans had proven they could disrupt the Zyphorians' operations. Now, the plan was to strike at the heart of their empire itself. If Earth could take down the Zyphorian capital, they could bring the empire to its knees once and for all. Captain Harris, his crew, battle-worn but resolute, stood before the War Council, eyes set with determination. The humans were not prepared to wait for the Zyphorians to regroup. They would take the fight to the very core of their enemy's stronghold. A daring move that could either bring about their downfall or their greatest victory. We've hit them hard enough to make them fear us, Harris said, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. Now, we go straight for their capital. If we succeed, we end this war. If we fail, Earth is lost. There was a grim silence among the council members. The risks were enormous. The Xiphorians were not only powerful, they were desperate. Every leader in the room knew that this attack could be their final chance. The decision was unanimous. They would strike the human fleet. Now bolstered by the knowledge of how the Xiphorians fought and how they could be beaten, began its journey toward the Xiphorian capital. It was a treacherous course, far from the relative safety of Earth, and the Xiphorians were aware that Earth's fleet had already proven itself capable of taking down their warships. The closer they got to the Xiphorian homeworld, the more dangerous the mission became. As the fleet neared the planet, they encountered the first signs of the Xiphorians' desperation. A blockade formed around their capital, a massive, impenetrable wall of ships, weapons, and defensive systems. It was a clear message. No one was allowed near the heart of the Empire. The humans had expected this. But even so, the scale of the challenge was staggering. Thousands of Xiphorian ships, each one a fortress, lay in wait. The human fleet, though smaller and more agile, was vastly outnumbered. But Captain Harris had a plan that hinged on their speed, their cunning, and their ability to adapt in real time. "We move fast, we move together," Harris said to his crew, the weight of his words heavy on their shoulders. "We slip through their defenses, hit them where it hurts, and get out before they can retaliate." The Xiphorians watched as the humans' ships began their approach, their sensors zeroing in on the incoming targets. The aliens expected a full-on assault, a predictable move that they could counter with overwhelming firepower. But they underestimated humanity's ability to think beyond the expected. The human fleet split into two smaller groups, one moving in a decoy formation, drawing most of the Xiphorian ships to engage with them. The other, led by the Resolute, moved stealthily toward the heart of the Xiphorian defenses, using every available trick to avoid detection. Their cloaking technology, honed to perfection over the course of the war, was their best chance of slipping through the blockade. Plan worked. As the Xiphorian ships focused their attention on the decoy group, the human fleet slipped past their defenses. The tension was palpable, every ship on edge, knowing that this was their only chance. There was no room for error. One mistake, one wrong move, and the entire mission would fail. The heart of the Xiphorian capital was now within reach. The humans had made it past the defenses, but the final leg of the journey was the most dangerous yet. The heart of the capital world was guarded by the most formidable fleet the Xiphorians had ever assembled. But now, as the human ships approached the heart of their empire, they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of their planet. "Ready the weapons," Harris commanded, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "Prepare to strike the heart of their empire." The final countdown began. As the human fleet neared the Xiphorian capital, they unleashed everything they had. The weapons fired in synchronized harmony, hitting their targets with surgical precision. The Xiphorians tried to regroup, but they were already on the defensive. The humans struck their command centers, their power grids, their energy supplies. Every shot that hit its mark was a step closer to ending the war. The Xiphorians fought back with everything they had left. Their ships unleashed wave after wave of energy blasts, but they were too slow. The humans were faster, more precise. The human ships, small and agile, danced around the fire, dodging, weaving, striking with deadly force, and then, in one final, breathtaking move, the Resolute fired the last shot, devastating blow that struck the Zyphorian capital's core reactor. The entire planet shook with the force of the explosion. The once mighty empire, so confident in its unchallenged reign, was now in ruins. Silence fell over the battlefield. The humans had done it. They had struck at the heart of the Zyphorian Empire and brought them to their knees. The war was over, but the price had been steep. Captain Harris stood at the helm of his ship, looking out at the wreckage of the empire they had just destroyed. He had led his people to victory, but at what cost? The message was clear. Earth would never again be the underdog, and the Zyphorians would never forget the day humanity stood against them, shattered their empire, and changed the course of the galaxy forever.